A very good afternoon to all of our friends here in Princess Live, and welcome to yet another amazing enrichment lecture that is going to be happening here with a great speaker that you've probably heard of before during your vacation with us on the Sun Princess. He's someone that's worked with NASA, and today he's going to tell you all about the Kennedy Space Center and take you on a tour as well during his great presentation. So without further ado, we're ready to get it started, and please give a warm welcome to the stage, Mr. Stephen Cox.
So a couple disclaimers right off the bat. I had nothing to do with the hurricane, so I could get an extra pitch in. It's not me. And also, this one isn't as dramatic as the last two. This is a tour, so it's a little more on the informational side, so there's nothing as dramatic as what happened in the last two pitches, but that's okay. We need it less drama right now, so with the hurricane going on. And then one other thing, somebody asked me a question about whether Neil Armstrong wrote, or his One Step for a Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind was written. He wrote that on the way there. In fact, Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin pestered him to tell him what he was going to say, and he didn't have it then. So he wrote it there on the way to the moon. So he had 3 days to do something. So. All right, so let's get going, and we'll start talking. So the first thing is, does everybody know where Kennedy Space Center is? Has anybody seen the VAB or anything like that? Have you noticed that if you fly into Orlando and it's good weather, you can see it hanging off the side like some kind of big, huge box? All right, so we're all tied in together. We're going to the same place. So let me see if this green laser works. Hey, a little bit. So this is where we are. There was another selection for a site that was up here in Georgia, but they chose this one because of the logistics, and the closer you are to the equator, the better for launching rockets. So they're spinning 1,000 miles an hour. So if you're on the equator, you get a 1,000-mile-an-hour boost. If you're on the pole, you get nothing. So the further, they like to try and launch from the equator if they can, but there's not a lot of land down there, and the logistics are terrible. So this is where they picked. It's basically a swamp. So everything from the Indian River right here to this is the Banana River. This is all swamp. So they filled it in. We do have the VAB and the LCC are right in here. These are the launch pads, and then this is the industrial area right here. And you can see that these were the pads all lined across here. And I've got a better drawing of that to show you how intense that was a little later. So we'll start out by a wildlife refuge. It made a really good blend between land that you can't use for anything because you don't want anybody nearby to having a wildlife, because there's no buildings along the beach. There's rocket pads, but there's no hotels, no anything like that. So nobody developed anything in there. In fact, my wife's parents used to live out there, and they got kicked out. They had to move. So they have a nice wildlife refuge there, and we do have some creatures there. Some of them help us out with security, checking badges. He's putting in for a job as the new crawler transporter. And just to let you know, I took this picture. I was driving along my motorcycle. I did not stop, by the way. That thing's over 10 feet. So we do have a very good security detail out there. And I think at one time somebody actually hid out in the woods trying to watch a launch, and they actually came in with their hands up after getting eaten by mosquitoes. So we have a few more. We have some air patrol up here. We have some rosy spoonbills. If you are lucky and you go out, you can go out and watch the turtles lay eggs. That's an event. Better take some mosquito spray with you. And then we've got the cleanup crew here, and then we've had some otters out there running around. So this is another drawing to show you how many launch pads are out there. So we've talked about some of these. This is the two we're going to talk about a little bit today. Elon Musk has this one. NASA's launching from this one, and they had a vision for 2 more, not 3 more. This was an alternate plan. That was going to be made in the middle of the water, so they didn't really do that. And then we have this little thing over here on the side that you might know about, Port Canaveral. And then this is a Trident submarine base right there. They're actually nuclear-powered ballistic submarines that come in there. But I didn't tell you that. It didn't come from me. So when you have a launch place, you need a runway. And we've already talked a little bit about this. This is one of the longest runways in the world. And I don't know if it is anymore, but at the time it was not when they built it. So the contractor asked, hey, can I add 10 feet to the runway on my own dime so that I have built the longest runway? So they let him do it. So he did that. So right over here is this device right here is, everybody can see, is where they take off the shuttle from the back of the 747. It's kind of like a lift. And this hangar right here is where they brought in Colombia. We talked about on the first day, and that's where they laid it all out on the floor in that building. Now you can see the shuttle when it comes in. That's a terrible picture. I'm sorry, my bad. But you can see it when it comes in. They actually do a pass. They fly around and they drive up the river and down the beach so people can see it come in, and it's pretty awesome. Me and another guest were talking about the other day that it's pretty awesome to watch. So now we're going to start to talk about some of the buildings, and the big one to show is the VAB, Vehicle Assembly Building, not Vertical Assembly Building. I get them mixed up too, and nobody really cares, but everybody calls it the VAB. So there's some interesting things about it, but at the time it was one of the largest buildings in the world by volume, at about 13 million cubic feet, anyway. And it had some of the largest doors. It has its own weather system, so you can have clouds form in there and it rain inside. These doors, they open and close them to kind of control that weather because they don't want a lot of humidity. The roof of it is 8 acres. So, and on my last pitch, I showed you my last day of work, and I went on top of that building and watched the sun coming up. And then over here on the side, you've got the LCC. This is the building that I managed. One of my friends managed this one. I managed this one. He managed that one. This was bigger. And this is the mobile launch platform that they use for shuttle. Well, shuttle had a clear pad concept, didn't have a tower next to it. Saturn V did, and the Artemis program does. My parking space is right there somewhere, next to that pole. So I thought I'd throw this in. I debated on it, but this is after Hurricane Francis, so we get beat up out there pretty bad too. And if you noticed on the last one, you can still see some of the scars from where they cleaned it up. So we got hit pretty bad out there. Now this is just the details here, but just throw a couple of things in. It has 4 high bays, so the building is basically hollow. And so there's 4 places where you could stack rockets. Now they intended it for it to be 6, and I'll show you that in a minute. But it's about 3 to 4 miles from the pad. I already talked about most of this was built between 1962 and 65. Now my father-in-law here, who I didn't know at the time, because I was like 1, he worked on the VAB, and he's got a picture of somewhere he's standing on the very top of the VAB on an 8-inch I-beam with no tether, no nothing. And that's how they did it. They worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and for 3 years till they got it done, and then it took another year to finish outfitting it. Now they say there's a flag on the side of this thing here. See this flag? And they have all kinds of statistics about that. So it's 210 feet by 110 feet wide, and they say you could drive a bus down one of the stripes. You could probably go down, but I don't think you can go up, unless it's some kind of Spider-Man bus or something. Maybe they took it up the elevator and then dropped down. I don't know how you drive a bus down. So this is a vintage. I have to do that because it's an old chart, showing you kind of how the flow of things are. So you've got the LCC. That's where they do all the testing. All the data comes from here back into here. You've got a low bay. You bring in all the space capsule and everything, and you stack it. And you've got the 4 high bays, and this goes inside. And then you have a big truck that comes underneath the crawler, and that's the crawlway. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. That's just kind of the flow of how the rocket goes for the Saturn V. This is a movie. So I'm going to talk a little bit, but so you can see you're inside the VAB. This is Artemis, and in order to put it in the cell, because it's not completely open to the cell, you have to go all the way to the roof. And I thought it was worth the time to go ahead and do that, even though I didn't speed it up. This is actually real time. You can see the people working really fast. They actually work that fast? No, this thing moves along at a crawl, like you can hardly even see it move when they're dropping it in, because you can't bump anything, you can't make any mistakes. Those are the solids. Now these are the same solids they use on the shuttle, but there's one more segment. So there's 5 of the instead of 4. And those were over 1 million pounds of thrust apiece, I think. And then they use the engines are the shuttle main engines, the RS-25 engines, so they use the same engine. And they're about $50 million a pop. So I can buy a couple of those. So this is it coming down to set it in place. Come on, faster. So I wanted to show it all the way in because I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I gotta go ahead and finish it. But you can see how big it is and how technical it is. That is really, I think this is like times 16 speed. So all those engines go in the ocean, so they don't get reused. So that's it coming and setting in. So this is another representation. So these are the three programs that have mainly used the VMB. So you've got the Saturn V with 5 F1 engines. You've got the shuttle, and it has the RS-25 engines and 2 solids. Then you've got Artemis, it's also in there, and it's got 2 solids as well. But you can look at these engines for the shuttle. They're about 500,000 pounds of thrust apiece, and the F1 engines are 1.5 million pounds of thrust each. Now, they didn't have any solids on there, but you can just tell the difference in the technology of these. They were really ahead of their time. I mentioned it was very difficult to do this program, so very complicated. So I thought, hey, we'll see if that bus will fit in the elevator and go up. But this is a ride up to the top. Some of the elevators actually have glass walls, which is kind of cool. I don't know the exact cost of it. I don't know the cost of the VAB. You're going to have to give you a sticker afterwards because you stopped me. So. No, I understand. They spent about $40 billion on the whole program for the 60s, something like 5% of the GNP is going in there. So I've been up this many times. It's kind of a fun ride. I always go find the one with the glass elevator just to make sure. So you can see it's really open. The whole structure's open. So this I talked about on Columbia. This is actually on the 16th floor of Columbia. This is where the Columbia is now. That's the parts that are in there. And I don't know what this is over here, but somebody's been looking for Joe for a while. This is a fireman test dummy, so it weighs about 150 pounds. The firemen have to go pick it up. But it's someplace in the VAB, and it's not hard to get lost in the VAB. Like one time I was up there looking to check out one of the bathrooms that they were remodeling, and they had taken the handle off. And I was in one of the towers that nobody goes in, and when I shut the door, it was dark, and there was no handle, and I couldn't get out. So I'm sitting there, they're going to find me in a couple years drinking water out of a toilet or something. That's not going to be fun. But I finally stuck my key in the door and took it out. Now, I didn't mention one thing, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but I'm in too deep already. So there was one person that died while constructing the VAB. Let's see what his name was. Wrong way. I talked to my father-in-law, and he said that he knew the guy. It's Oscar Smith. He said he was talking on the phone, hung up the phone, turned around, and walked off the 36th floor. So he was the only guy. He was the only guy that died. Now you always hear stories about these big construction projects and how fast they're working. He was the only one that fell, and it was really kind of his mistake for not paying attention. Let's catch back up. So this is the Launch Control Center. This is my building, and you can see right here on the front that the windows are different. Now these are the old. These are the old windows, and these are shutters on the front. Now the shutters, there's 2 explanations for that. Either they shut them so that if something blew up, they wouldn't come back on you. But it really were to knock down the glare coming through the window. And so when they put the new windows in, they just put them with anti-glare. This is actually a piece of the old window, and I'll have it up here. I would pass it around, but they're not making this anymore, so I'm going to keep it up here if you want to see it. But it's pretty thick. Somebody mentioned that it's not as thick as some of the windows on this ship. So this is one of my projects. This is Firing Room 2, and that's all the cable left over from Apollo, and then they threw the shuttle cables on top of that, and then they came into me and said, okay, go pick out the good cables and the bad cables. So we just cleaned the entire place out. I must have taken out the boxes that are 4 foot by 4 foot. But we also had 100 of those boxes that came out of there full of cable. And we took out, this is all asbestos. This piping is all asbestos on it. It was a mess. So this is, I talked a little bit about this. At one point they started a tradition where they let the families of the crew draw on a whiteboard to keep them busy, the kids. And a couple of stories about that. I was given a tour at, they have plexiglass over the front of them because they're just whiteboards. And some girl went up and put her hand on it. And I said, please take your hand off there. And she said, it's my hand. And I said, I know it's your hand. Can you take it off? She said, no, it's my hand. And I finally listened to her, and it was a hand drawn under the board. That was her hand. Her grandfather went on a shuttle mission, and she drew on the board. So she gets to touch whatever she wants to. I'm like, what do you eat? What do you talk about at breakfast with your grandpas? Hey, Dad, what'd you have for breakfast in space? I don't know. So this is one that I didn't talk about earlier. This is the shuttle board that Columbia did. And they had it on display like that with the other ones, and they decided, no, we're not going to do that. So they pulled it and they tucked it back in near the office space. So if you work there, you could go over and see it. But not many people see this one because it's not on any tour route. So. So this one shows all the firing rooms. So the first one over here doesn't work for me anymore. So this is officially not working. That's all right. So this is an Apollo era, and they look towards the back. This one is a shuttle era, and they look towards the front. So the next program, Artemis, we look both ways. So we use something that somebody else did. So it'll look both ways. And that's just me goofing off. So this is the window when Artemis was coming out. So you can see when you're in there, it's pretty impressive to stand in front of that window and look out if there's launch going on. I never got to go in there for a launch, but I was in there for testing. This is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, and she is the launch director for the mission. You have a policy when you do your first mission, they cut your tie off, and so that's always fun. So you can see it's a pretty massive rocket. This crawler picks up like 18 million pounds. I've given many tours, and this the man in the white shirt is, anybody know? Buzz Aldrin, yes. And Jim Lovell is not him. And don't ask me who the guy with the blue tie. I don't remember him. So I also toured them around. Oh, I'm right over here, by the way. And my intern's taking these pictures, and I didn't get in a single one of them. I'm like, what good are you? So, and they're fuzzy, so but that's all I got. So down in the lobby, I finally got the camera, and I took a picture, and that's my boss, who I got a picture of her. So, and I toured him around. So what happened at the end was kind of one of my funny stories I like to tell. Again, I think it's funny, but he was asking, everybody was standing there, and this 18-passenger van comes up, and this NASA administrator gets on, everybody else gets on the bus, and here's an 80-year-old hero of the United States standing there on a curb trying to get in the front seat of an 18-passenger van. So I'm like, what's not going to be in the news is that Buzz Aldrin tripped and fell in front of the LCC. So I'm kind of walking next to him, and I open the door, and he kind of climbs in, and I give him a bottle of water, and I buckle his seatbelt in, because that's what I do. And I said, sir, I used to buckle my wife in when I was dating her, and I still do, and I got a kiss for that. And he kind of looked at me, and I said, I'll forgo that at your taste. So he said, thank you, and I'm not sure if it was buckling him or not kissing, but if the option had coming up to kiss him, I would have done it. So, I mean, he still hasn't washed his hand from shaking hands with Neil Armstrong. So this is actually, he was there because they were dedicating the operations checkout building where they put the spacecraft together, and that's where Orion is being built by Lockheed Martin right now. So is it Lockheed Martin or Boeing? It's hard to tell. It's one of those two. And so you've got Charlie Bolden over here, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Jim Lovell, and Bob Cavanagh, who's was one of the first shuttle pilots. And I talked about this earlier. So they donated a spacesuit to the ONC to put it in the lobby so you could see it, but it turns out that that's made of mini spacesuits. Maybe one of the pieces went on the moon, but nobody really knows and nobody's talking. So but that's in the lobby. If you go there, if you happen to get out there, you can see that. So now we've got a couple other pieces we need. We got a big building to build things out of. We got a bunch of land, and so we've got a platform. Now this platform, one makes it work again. Anyway, is made from an oil derrick, like an oil platform out in the ocean. So the guys who made those made this, and then they put the tower on it and stacked the rocket on it. But then you've got to get it in and out of the VAB, so they've got a crawler transporter that picks things up. And I went and got a tread. You can see it over in the bottom corner. They weigh about 1 ton apiece, 2,100 pounds. And that one's actually broke. That's why I got it so easily. Well, not easily, it was a ton. So I had to get a crane. I would have liked to take, in fact, I used to tell interns when they came in, if you can pick it up, you can take it home. And they tried. So this is the crawler. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Let me see the next one here, but I think I'm going to get a guy named John Giles to tell you. So this is what it picks up. So that's Bob Cavanagh there and Charlie Bolden. And this is, the guy on the right is John Jarvis. That's real-time speed. Now what's fun is if you're driving by, they make you stop your car on the side of the road because they don't want you to do anything stupid. And so you can sit there and watch it go by. Now they spray water to keep the dust down. It also kind of makes the bearings on the bottom. Those rocks are hauled in from a special place in Alabama that they're a certain size so they don't break up. That runway is about 15 feet thick of those rocks. So it picks up 18,000 pounds, 18 million pounds, excuse me, million pounds. It's auto leveling, so it's got a really good suspension system. And some numbers here, I think, on the chart. Nope, yeah, I'm supposed to remember them all. All right, 32 feet per gallon, that's all it gets. only holds 6 people. So in the car and driver book, it did good in some categories, but not against like an F-150. You know? It's a lot better gas mileage even at 15 miles per gallon. And that's Artemis over the other side there. So that's the crawler transporter. And did we finish Mr. Giles' thing? Let's watch it again. So, yeah. I do not know the answer to that, but they had to refit it from shuttle because the boosters, the Apollo went out on the pad dry, no fuel. But you got Artemis coming out with 2 fully fueled stock solids, very, very heavy. So they had to refuse all the hydraulics. And the first time they drove it, they blew hoses all over the place. So John Giles, the guy that was in charge of the project, he went nuts because it was spraying hydraulic fluid everywhere. So I don't remember the company. So a lot of the stuff at this time, the Army Corps of Engineers was involved in, because they built all of this in about 5 years, and they built it all at the same time. Some of the pictures you see where they're building the VAB, the mobile launch platforms, the LCC, and the pads, everything's they worked solid 24 hours a day straight doing it. So you can see the pad is ramped. That's a bunch of concrete going up there to it. So this was a drawing I found. They only made launch pads 39A and B. Like I said, SpaceX is using A, NASA is using B, and they never made the other 2 pads, but their vision was to have more pads. And I think I blew by the one photograph that showed the VAB with 6 high bays in it. So how to let me do that? So this is a cool shot. It's got Artemis on the pad and also Falcon 9. So that's a pretty neat shot. So I'm going to give you a tour from the clean room arm that comes over to the spacecraft for shuttle and back. You can see what it looks like walking out there in reverse. So these are people who on the team that signed the wall. This is looking out, going out as if you walked in. This is the gangway walking out to the clean room. I'll show you the clean room again in a minute. So the shuttle is not on the pad right now. There's no vehicle, so you'll see where it's going to look down. You can see. So when you're up there, this is steel grate. So when you go up there, it's like kind of spooky because you're way up there in the air. These are the baskets that they get in emergency. They go run jump in these baskets and it slides them down. So I grabbed up some people in my office one time and said, hey, I got this number on here that allows me to go to the pad. And said, yeah, let's go out to the pad. So we went out there and we walked up to the pad, and I get up there, and of course you have to stop to talk to the security guard. And I walk up and it's my mother-in-law. And she's talking to my wife on the phone, so she thought that was kind of funny. I have a great mother-in-law. In fact, she arrested me on my birthday, my 30th birthday. She sent the police to my office and had me arrested, so that was fun. She was fun mom. Yes. So this is the clean room that we were just showing you from the other side, and that's Atlantis. That's the door. And if you go out there, they're really friendly. They'll let you, I've gone in there. They let you stick your head in and look around and see what's going on. As long as the astronauts aren't there. If the astronauts are there, they're kind of busy. So. In the bottom of the pad for the shuttle, for the Saturn V program, they didn't have escape wires that went across. They had a tunnel, and they would jump in this tunnel, and it would shoot them down to the bottom in a slide. And they'd come into this room underneath it, and then going out from each side of it, they had 2 evacuation tunnels, and that's where I'm sitting in there. The first guy to try it, they put Teflon on the runway, on the thing. So he slid all the way down and broke his foot. So they did some stuff. They put some big foam paddings down there, some smash. It's not used anymore, and hardly anybody goes in there. So we're getting closer to the end, and I think I'm doing really good on time, so we'll have some time for questions. Yeah, we're doing really good. I talk too fast. All right, so this is Hangar AE. So there's the manned program on the Cape side and on the Kennedy side, and then there's the unmanned program on the Cape side, the Air Force side. And I worked a lot with the unmanned vehicles, and they did it out at this hangar. And so these are the control rooms, and that's what I helped build, was these control rooms here. Oh, now you decided to work. And these are for the engineering teams, and you can see all the missions they've worked. And these are for the management teams. This was called the Mission Director Center. So there's an acronym for everything. So Mission Director Center, and my call sign when they talk to you on the phone is MD. So MDC, the M, operations director. I wanted to be the ground operations director. That was call sign was already taken. It would have been lowercase g, not a big G. So this is another view of it, and this is a nice TV I made. It's 6 foot by 34 feet. And you can put anything up there, football, soccer. You can see we put different views. These are spacecraft in the spacecraft processing area. This is a delta at the pad. You can see the solid rocket booster. And these are the consoles. I sat at one of these consoles. Maybe I have a view of that. So we'll see if this works. Quick, right there. See me? Right there. All right. Okay, try again. This is my 2 seconds of fame. They're in. Still didn't catch me? I'll play it again. All right, so I kind of always have trouble when I do these, how much charts they put in there and how fast I talk, so I talked pretty fast. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do some fun. And Scotty, if you can juice me when the volume comes up.
Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
Okay.
Hydrogen
This
burn
is
off
Artemis.
initiated. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
So this is Starship Heavy. Elon Musk, this is Boca Chica. That's the biggest rocket ever flown. And they landed that booster successfully in the water for the first time, and the other one flew all the way to Hawaii and landed on the coast of Hawaii. This is a Falcon 9 Heavy. Four different views of the solids of the first stages come back. And this center core keeps going. So this is the center core coming back down. No audio for this one. I think the name of the boat is called, I think I Still Love You or something like that. I think every rocket they landed for about the first 20 just blew up all over the place. So, wrap this on back around the cruise ships. If you come into Port Canaveral, you might be there seeing this on the side. And when you leave there, it'll be just sitting right there at the side of the Falcon rocket on it. They actually run out when it lands, and they weld the legs to keep it from falling over, but recently they had one toss over. People were all upset. Hey, you blew up a rocket on landing, and they really didn't. Everybody else's rocket goes into the water, by the way. So some of these have flown up to 19 times. I think he's got his engines down. There's 9 on there. I think he's getting them down to about basically $250,000 an engine, and he flies it 9 times as opposed to Artemis that's $50 million an engine, and they all go in the water. So you can see what the difference between a private and a government operation is. Now, for some reason, I just zoomed right through this thing, but that's okay. Don't clap. Thank you for the photos and everything from all the people. Thank you, cruise ship. Thank you, everybody. Now I'm going to take some questions. We'll go with that. I'll put this nice, pretty picture back. I've got a few stickers left over, so I'll try and answer some questions and give out some stickers. And then, if you see me around the ship, hey, I'm going to be here for another 8 hours, 10 hours. But go ahead. I'm not sure what their test process is, but for the shuttles, they completely dismantled the engines and rebuilt them. He flies them back. He basically dusts them off and goes again. He said it cost. I heard that it cost about as much to fuel the Falcon 9 as to fuel a 747. I want to put this in perspective. This ship, I think, sure about this, but cost about $500 million. Does anybody want to answer that? I've launched missions that were over $1 billion. So every time you see a launch out there, the competitors for SpaceX were running at $200, $300 million a launch for the rocket, and he's pushing it way below that. And you can see by the cost of the engines. So this is a very expensive process. You know, those satellite phones that you have and everything, that's very good. Did you get a sticker? Yep. Okay, so the question was how many launch facilities around the United States are being used. So the Kennedy Space Center is good for going with the equator as the Earth turns. So geosynchronous in that area. The space station is pretty high up on the inclination, so they can get there too, with difficulty. But they go out of California, Vandenberg, which I worked at as well, they have the same kind of outfit out there, and that's for polar launches. And they actually have to launch a little retrograde, so they launch a little backwards. I had a story, since we're running time-wise, there's an oil derrick out there, and they were watching the launches, and they go, wow, there's the launch, all excited, very cool. And they started looking, and they see the solids separate, and they start watching the solids. Wow, that's pretty big. And it landed within like 2 miles of the oil rig. So now they have to do a dog leg, and when they fly out, they had to go out, so they don't drop anything on anybody. So. Oh yeah. Let me get one on the other side, because I want to see, is there any over here? I don't get to pick any of them. So there's a selection process. In fact, I told a story that in our area, we did the space lab, and our guys were like really sharp. And my supervisor put in to get one, because she was a pilot and an engineer, and she'd worked with Space Lab, and she didn't get picked. But one of our guys in our group, Scott Vangen, he went to go to Marshall, where they fly Space Lab on orbit, and he worked with the crew, and he was very knowledgeable, and they actually let him become a backup astronaut for a mission. So he's walking around. Oh, the funny thing is he went to go for his astronaut interview, and the girls in the group grabbed him and said, okay, ponytail's got to go, and you got to buy you new clothes. So he came in afterwards without his ponytail in the back, and he had his little jumpsuit on. And it was fun. He didn't get a fly, but we offered to sneeze on whatever astronaut he wanted us to sneeze on, so we didn't do that. So let's get one over here. You got to give me the question first. This is a pay-per-question thing. Do you have a question? Here, take. Okay, the question was, can he have one for his granddaughter? Take over the world? Okay, so SpaceX, the question is, why doesn't SpaceX share their information to help out some of the other? They do. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk does not get patents on his stuff because he's trying to spread the technology around. But he is so fast at doing things that people just can't keep up with him. So, but that's a good question. So, and he does. In fact, he's offered to help in some situations where, like, Boeing doesn't really want him to help because it kind of makes him look bad. I mean, when you have to have somebody retrieve you, and when your car's broken, they come pick you up with dragons. So, all right. The AIDS. Interns. Well, I pick them. So they have people apply and they come to the Space Center. So NASA has a real good study program with colleges. So if you can get into the program, my daughter did one out at in California. And if you can get into the program, you can actually stay there. And as long as you work 6 months and a day in the year, 6 months plus 1 day, you get full-term credit. So I'm here and getting my 5-year pin. And here's a guy I'm working with that's only been working there 2 years, but he interned for 3 years. So he was 3 years ahead of me basically. So let me get one back here in the back. I'll just come on around there. Y'all, I'm gonna break your neck, so you just kind of look around. We'll try that, see how it works. Since this is my last one, I don't mind if I give out everything. This is called being crowd interactive. Now, do you have a granddaughter too?
I remember a long time ago when we took a tour of the Kennedy Space Center. We got into the DAB and we got into some of the old launch control. Can a civilian get into the DAB anymore? We're just not flying the right tour.
So you used to go to Spaceport, Florida. I did not know promotional fees. Spaceport, Florida has some tours to go around there, and they used to take them into the VAB and the LCC. I know they stopped doing the LCC because I was the one giving part of that tour, and I'm not sure if they continued on with the VAB. But if they've got work in there if they've got a vehicle stack, but you can't go in there anyway. So, because it's, you know, the solids are kind of dangerous. So, oh, coming this way, stepping on people. What did you? How long till we get to Mars? I don't think I'll ever get there. I'm not brave enough to get on one of those rockets, but Elon's got a plan to get there. He would like to have have some people on there before he expires. That's one of his goals. He's probably going to end up going to the moon, back to the moon first with men, but that's all speculation. So, you know, it's a very difficult thing. You know, if you just ran some really wild card numbers, it's probably, you know, from the Apollo program at 40 billion. Now that'd be 400 billion. And if you go into the Mars, is like an order of magnitude more complicated. So it'd be like half a trillion dollars to do it. I don't think we have the fortitude or the, you know, from a political aspect. That's a political question, by the way. I'll be right over there. Not giving my mother well enough attention, probably. The comedy. They didn't put handcuffs on me, okay? That would have been too far. If you come as a visitor and you're getting badged, you need 2 IDs. Yeah. Yeah. So I had a film crew came, and they're filming, and I have to watch them in the LCC because, you know, it's a $1 billion control room, can't have them break it. Yeah. So one of the guys only brought in one form of ID and didn't get in. He was a grip. So I ended up being the grip for the day, so they fired him. I do not know what they did with it. I do not know. That's not a stump. My answer is I do not know. It's around. These, I have these at home. How about one of these? So let's get back here, get a couple, and then we're probably going to have to start wrapping up here a little bit. So all of the systems are isolated, so they don't have open systems. They do have networks, but it has to come to there's one gateway coming in and out, and that is very monitored. In fact, we had somebody come in there and do some filming, and it was like, oh, no filming in here, you can't, we got to get this stuff out of here before you film. So. One more over here. You're a girl, so. Oh, well, the question was the Starliner crew. I don't know if you know this, but I've been kind of captive on this ship for a couple of days and didn't really have any good internet. And, so the question is the Starliner crew that's up on the space station. I think there's now a Dragon up there. The Starliner left, landed safely, the Dragon's up there. The plan was for the Dragon to finish their mission, come back in February with all 4 of them. I don't know if they've changed that plan or not, but I'll find out and get back to you on the next cruise.
What kind of capacity does the Space Force have at this point?
So the Space Force is really just a name. Nothing's really changed. They used to have the Air Force Space Command, Naval Space Command, and it was just a branch of the Air Force. And so they just basically consolidated everything space related underneath one kind of operation instead of having somebody doing things for the Navy. Because I used to work for the Naval Space Command when I first got there. Over here, and I got 2 more, and then I got bands, and then I'm going to go to Titusville tomorrow morning. So the question was, is NASA going to do anything to do the space station? So it's already passed part of its certificated life. So they certified it to operate for a certain amount of time, and they've already gone back and started looking at some of these certifications. So they're going to keep doing that so they understand the shape of it and make sure nothing's at risk. But they'll probably do that as long as they can. But it's a budget thing. It's a political thing, it's an engineering thing, and then you have to weigh, okay, what are we all getting out of all this, and can we do something better? So, one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. I know I'm early, but, all right, one more sticker. Pass that back to her. Right. So the limb is the Eagle. So the question is, what was the vehicle that landed on the moon? Well, they had different names. it was called the landing module, LIM, with a ascent module on top of it. And so every crew came up with their own names. I think one was Charlie Brown and Snoopy. One was, Columbia and Eagle. I can't remember all the names, but there were some pretty interesting names. Well, that's all I have for you. Sorry for a little bit quick, but I can never judge how it's going to go. Thank you very much. And if it wouldn't bother me much if